Hi, and welcome to the How to Survive Healthcare podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Thompson-Riviere, seasoned critical care RN turned independent patient advocate. Tune in every week so that you can learn the things about the U.S. healthcare system that no one ever tells you. That way that you can get the most from it and optimize your health outcomes. Now, of course, this podcast is strictly to inform and entertain and should never be taken as a substitute for medical advice. Let's dive right in. All right, welcome back to another episode here of the podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about some top tips for avoiding dangerous medication errors. Now, the Academy of Managed Care Pharmacy estimates that at least 1.5 million people in the US every year are harmed by medication errors. And they can occur at any point in the medication process. That's through prescription, when the doctor is writing what medication or how much, dispensing, when the pharmacist is actually taking the pills and putting them in your bottle, or administration. And that's where you as the individual is taking the medications. This is not exclusive to the home setting. This applies in hospitals too. In hospitals, there's a few more people in the steps. You have a nurse administering the medications. That nurse does act as the last line of defense to double check everything. So you do have a little bit, it's sort of a catch 22, because you do have a few more eyes on things, which can provide as extra, safeguard and double check. However, there's also the added, you've probably heard the phrase, too many cooks in the kitchen can spoil the soup. I've seen sometimes where there's so many people involved, sometimes this person will assume that because there's so many other people involved that, it's already been checked. And so it can kind of work against you. Additionally, when you are in a hospital setting, your condition is changing. So even medications that are appropriate normally, like your normal home medications, maybe aren't appropriate while you're in the hospital. So it can go either way as far as that's concerned. Some of the common causes of medication error I want to talk about. So the most common cause probably is miscommunication between healthcare providers and yourself, or healthcare providers between each other. This most commonly occurs during care transitions. So going from one hospital to another facility, or discharging from the hospital or a facility back into the home. Another reason is confusing medication names or similar packaging. Sadly, there was an issue several years ago where quite a few infants died because they were accidentally overdosed on heparin, which is a blood thinner. And through the investigation, they realized that the heparin packaging, there was two different doses, and one of them was 10 times the strength of the other, and the packages look nearly identical. So that is the reason that we that medication errors are encouraged to be reported, is so that they can be investigated to see if there is commonalities to try to prevent it in the future. But that's that one can, and sometimes people think, what do you mean packaging? How could that affect it? That's where that plays a role. Incomplete medication history also puts you at risk. So this is one that is in a great deal of control is in your hands. You should always have an up-to-date medication list on you. If you haven't yet, I invite you to go to herdforlife.com and sign up for my mailing list. The first thing that you'll get from me is a tool that I built called Health Hub. It's a PDF that you download. You download it before you put any information in it, so none of your information comes back to me. But it's a fillable PDF that you put in your medications along with a lot of other information about yourself. And you're able to then, anytime a medication or Any other piece of your health history gets adjusted, you can adjust it right there, and you can save it on your phone, on your computer, and or you can even print it out if you're old school. But that way, you have a really easy way to organize not only your medication history, but all of your health information so that you're prepared for doctor's appointments and medications and other things don't get missed. Lastly, the most common cause of medication errors is dosage errors. And you see this especially with children or the elderly or people who have some organ dysfunction. Most medications are filtered out and excreted through from the body by either the liver or the kidneys. So if one of those isn't working the way it should, sometimes a dose that would be normal or appropriate ends up being too high of a dose. And additionally, with regards to children, most of those medications are weight based. So it's always really important that we get accurate weights on them and that we're weighing them frequently because they grow so much, of course. And you don't want to be accidentally underdosing important medications. So what I encourage you to remember though is that you have a key person on your care team who's an expert in medications, and that's going to be your pharmacist. Your pharmacist is a phenomenal, probably underutilized resource. Anytime you go to pick up a prescription from the pharmacy, you've probably signed something that says, check mark, I decline to be counseled by the pharmacist. Usually they assume that you don't have questions, but I encourage you to, especially if it's a new medication or one that's considered high risk, or maybe it goes along with a new medical condition that you're not familiar with, ask to speak to the pharmacist. They may direct you to make an appointment and come back at another time, but it's important that you get that information so that you are safe about your medication and you know kind of all of the little things about it. For instance, a lot of times people are started on blood pressure medication and they're not always told to check their blood pressure. It's not always required, but I would because too low of a blood pressure can actually be incredibly dangerous. It can make you lose consciousness, pass out, potentially injure yourself if that happened while you were driving or standing, or God forbid, on a ladder or something. So that's just one example, but that's something you may not necessarily think about that your pharmacist can point out to you. I also have a list of 4 questions here that if you are going to talk to your pharmacist about your medications, that I would encourage you to ask. Number 1, something you should be able to answer about every medication you're on is how and when you should take that medication. Also, why you are on that medication. Number 2, what side effects should I watch out for and when should I call my doctor? Number 3, are there any foods, drinks, or other medications that I should avoid when taking this medication? And number 4, can this medication interact or potentiate with anything else that I'm taking? Key questions regarding medication safety. If you can't answer those questions about all of the medications you're currently prescribed, I encourage you to reach out to your pharmacist and book a time for medication review. You should always keep your pharmacist up to date on any changes. And part of that is go to one pharmacy only. That way you know that the pharmacist who is filling that prescription is definitely seeing what other prescriptions you're on. Things are getting better nowadays with different systems being able to communicate with each other. Like here where I live, we have a program called Care Everywhere, and you're actually able to log in and you can see what prescriptions they've gotten filled at different pharmacies. However, that's an extra step. And when you think about safety, the more extra steps there are, the more risk there is that something could be missed. So it's in your best interest to just pick one pharmacy and stick with it. That way, for sure, your pharmacist knows all the medications that you're on. So there is a condition not a condition, but a situation called polypharmacy. So if you are on 5 or more prescription medications, then you're considered to be have polypharmacy. It just means a lot of medications, basically. And once you get over that number of 5 and you start adding on 6, 7, I've seen people with 18, 19 different prescription medications. Your risk for some of them interacting and or for you taking some of them inappropriately just continues to rise with every extra medication that's added. It is incredibly important that if you are on more than 5 prescription medications, that number one, like I said, you stick with one pharmacy. Number two, you need to have a list. You need to have them written down. Like I said, I encourage you to use my free tool, but at a minimum, write them down on pen and paper and make sure when something changes that you clearly mark out that that is no longer and you write the new thing. I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody come in to the hospital and they don't know their medications and they bring this entire like grocery bag full of pill bottles, and some of them, I mean, were filled last year. You don't know if they're taking them, if it was just something they were on for a short stint, if they were supposed to finish it, if it was stopped. I mean, it's madness. It's a mess. And you're just setting yourself up to become a victim of a medication error. So have a list, know what's on the list, and know what you're supposed to be taking. And use tools to make sure that you're taking those medications appropriately. You can set alarms on your phone. You can use a pill box, separate them out for the week. They have, the simple ones that just there's one tab for the day. They have ones where there's maybe 4 different spots in a day. So you have morning pills, noon pills, evening pills, and night pills. They have, if you can, they got really fancy stuff now. There's this thing called Pill Hero, and it's like a machine that you load up. It's pricey, but check it out. It's an option. This machine that you load up and you put a cup under it, and it literally spits out the proper pills at the proper time. So that, especially if you have somebody, if we're talking about somebody who has maybe a little bit of memory issues and they're not sure, did they take them, did they not, or maybe they're not reliable to fill a pill box. This thing, it's like it holds a 28-day supply. So you can have, a caregiver fill it once in a month, and then the patient just needs to know that when the pills get spit out in the cup, they take them. Another option too is I know not all pharmacies do it. You have to ask your pharmacist. But if your local pharmacy doesn't do it, I know Amazon offers it, but you can get these like pill packs. So sort of like the multi-time pill divider that I was speaking of, except they're actually packaged by a pharmacist in a pharmacy. So it'll give you either a blister pack and you pop out at the date and time, or like a little baggie with the date and time on it, and that's the pills for that dosage. But any of those things, utilizing those tools will help to keep you on track and make sure that you're not missing medications or that you're not accidentally overdosing on medications. Lastly, you should schedule regular medication reviews. Again, if you're somebody with polypharmacy or more than 5 prescription medications, at any time, I encourage you to sit down with your pharmacist and be like, look, do I need to be on all of these meds? Are there some that we can eliminate? And then plan to do that regularly, say once a year or more frequently if you've had a huge health event and a change in a lot of medications. So those are my top tips for keeping safe with medications. I guess a couple that I didn't mention, of course, keep medications locked up and away from children, but that's sort of a little bit of a different topic. This was just in regards to as you're taking them. So I hope that this was helpful. If you have concerns or questions, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. You can find me at www.herdforlife.com. It's HEARDFORLIFE.com. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Ring the bell. You always hear people say that on YouTube, and it's funny now to be saying it, but it does help. The more attention that the podcast has, then the more the platforms will share it with other people. So yes, if you found this helpful, please share it with somebody who needs it. We want to keep all of our friends and family safe. So thank you for listening, and I'll be back to see you next week.